So basically, the idea is that Australia in 1996, you're claiming they basically wiped their hands of the UAP topic, right?
Yeah.
Now, you discover these documents that state that Australia, amongst other nations, but let's just stick with Australia here, has met with Aero in a private sort of meeting to discuss either past events, get information from Aero, sort of collaborate, and plan on a future of working together about UAP, topic. And you find that significant because they had claimed before, we're done with this, but clearly they are working on this, right?
Yep.
Oh, how do I say your last name, Grant?
Lavac.
Lavac. Okay, that's what I've been saying. I wasn't sure. Maybe it had a little, something
different. I mean,
I don't know.
It's Czech heritage, and a lot of people think it's French. Lavash means the cow, and it's not a cow or a toilet. So
I love it.
But yeah, Lavac is how I say it.
Lavac. All right. Well, Grant, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. It's good to be. I'm good. It's great to be with you. I appreciate you having me on, and sharing some insights and perspectives with your audience. So good to be with you.
Absolutely. And where are you joining us from, Grant?
So I'm based in Melbourne, originally Sydney, born and bred, raised in Sydney. Lived in LA for a year back in the day, about 20 years ago, and now live in Melbourne with my wife and two little ones. The housing market was just beyond us a couple of years ago, and Melbourne's becoming just as bad. But Melbourne, Australia, 4 seasons in one day. So not a fan of the cold down here, but
4 seasons.
Worse things could happen.
I love it. Yeah, that's great. You said you lived in LA for a year. What took you to LA?
Yeah, so a lot of folks, when they finish high school, they want to do a gap year, and a lot of Aussies travel to the UK or Europe. And I was a big NBA fan growing up as a little fella, and got to see a Bulls game when I was a teenager and see Michael Jordan play, and one of the greatest days of my life at that age.
Wow.
So I always traveled to the US because my mother worked in hospitality and would travel to the States and abroad every now and then. And just growing up as a teenager, got to go to the States a few times and just fell in love with the place. And my best friend from high school lived over there when he left high school, and so I'd visit him every year, and then I wanted to do a year abroad living in the States. And it's really, really hard to get work in the US if you're a foreigner. It's not like Australia, where you can just go over to the UK and get a job. But I found work, funny enough, working with the Australian government, the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. I was working at the Australian Consulate in Los Angeles, and which is a really interesting eye-opener into the bureaucracy of government, which wasn't for me. So I did a year living in LA and loved it, enjoyed it, and now came back, and I got a lot of friends in the States, and my day job is based in the States, so I travel there. Once COVID's put a bit of a spanner in the works, but usually once a year. So so I have a strong affinity for the US and my good pals abroad.
Dude, that's awesome. Wow, that's great, man. Yeah, Australians definitely love to travel. When I lived in Europe, I met Australians everywhere. Everywhere I went, they were everywhere. And I always say this, they were the coolest people. Australians are the coolest people to hang out with if you're traveling. They're just the most friendly, get down, do anything, talk about anything, go anywhere, drink anything. Like, let's hang out.
That's right.
I love
it.
I can't say enough great things.
And isn't it funny when you travel to another country and you run into an Aussie or a Yank, that's when you notice how bad your accent really is. Like when I travel to the States and I run into other Aussies, I'm like, man, do we really sound like that? We're so bogan, we're so.
What? Yeah. Sounds awesome. What are you talking about? We love accents here, bro. Are you kidding me? We love Australian accents.
But I mean, I've still got a bit of an American twang from my LA years, so I'm not as Aussie Ocker sounding as some of my friends down under. But yeah,
I love it. I don't think anyone would say LA gives you a twang, though.
That's true.
That's a Texas thing, right? Like maybe not Texas, but a Southern thing. Although California has a lot of ranches and cowboys, and
it's true.
It's got that too. So most people don't know. No, that's cool, man. Wow, what a great story. what a great life, right? You've
I've
lived
been
so
very
far. That's
fortunate
very cool.
to do a lot of travel, and
Yeah.
I mean, I've spent less time traveling in my own backyard in my own country than I've probably seen more of the rest of the world than my own backyard, which is I'm kind of a bit ashamed to say that, but I'd say that's true for a lot of folks. So now that I've got 2 little ones, hopefully my wife and I and our family can do a lot more travel at home.
Yeah. Exactly. Little family road trips, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
absolutely. Totally, man. No, that's great. So so what like so what gets you into the UAP topic? Like what gets you into UFOs? Was this something since you were a kid? Did you watch X-Files like a lot of people? Like,
Yeah.
I
Well, I
don't
mean,
know.
much like you, I haven't had an experience. I've never seen anything. I'd love to. I've certainly got on my bucket list. It'd be
It's
awesome to.
honestly, it's nice to meet someone else who hasn't had an experience because it's very rare in this
Yeah,
community,
that's
to be honest.
100%. A lot of the people that I've made friendships with and connected with have come to this topic because they've had an experience,
Sure.
or they know of someone that's had an experience. And so for me, when I was a little fella, I'm 45 years of age, and in the 80s, I was a child of the 80s, and in the mid 80s, my father took me to a UFO photo exhibition, which was on display at Australia's tallest skyscraper, called back then Sydney Centrepoint Tower. It's kind of like if you've been to Seattle, the Seattle Needle. It's kind of like the
Oh,
same
yeah.
sort of thing, and
Mhm.
it's in Sydney. And they had this UFO photo exhibition in the mid '80s, and I remember it was all these famous black and white photos of UFOs from like the 50s, and they're all blown up on big canvases, and one of them was the famous McMinnville UFO. And I remember being 7, 8 years of age. I just stared at this McMinnville UFO photo for what would have felt like 10, 15 minutes, and just trying to immerse myself into what that rancher or farmer would have been experiencing, taking that photo, the fear, the fascination. And that really was my kind of intro into the UFO topic. And then growing up as a teenager, like you said, you X-Files, 9 p.m. every Wednesday night, and then you do a big debrief with your schoolmates the next day. And then kind of my interest kind of ebbed and flowed in my adult years, girls, other topics, and so on. And
Sure.
but it wasn't until, like I guess so many of us, that when COVID hit and we were spending a lot more time at home than Melbourne had some of the harshest lockdowns in any city around the world. So we spent more time at home than anyone else. And but it was really before that, in 2017, when the Bombshell New York Times articles came out, that really reinvigorated my interest. And so throughout COVID, I kind of just became a sponge again on the topic, and trying to learn as much as I could from as many people as I could on the topic. And there was an online activism event called the Big Phone Home, which was all about encouraging everyday Americans basically to engage their elected representatives on the topic, and try and advocate for them to take it seriously. And that really got me, as an Australian, got me interested in thinking, well, the US is taking the topic so seriously, ever since really the ODNI's preliminary assessment came out on UAP on the 25th of June 2021. Since then, there's been a lot of folks engaging their elected representatives on the topic, and it got me thinking, well, what is Australia doing on the UAP UFO topic? And sadly, not a whole lot. I haven't been doing much. But what your audience might find interesting is Australia has almost as long as a history investigating the UFO topic, or what was referred to in Australia in decades past as UAS, unusual aerial sightings. That was the vernacular
Oh,
that was used within defense in Australia. Australia has almost as long as a history investigating the topic, dating back to the early 1950s, in the years after Roswell. And the term unidentified aerial phenomena, UAP, is not new. It actually appears in documents dating back to 1959 in Australia. Documents that you can find that are readily accessible in the National Archives of Australia has unidentified aerial phenomena, planted all over it. So it's not a new topic for Australia. It's what's frustrating for me is that Australia and the United States are the closest of allies, yet their positions today on UAP could not be further apart. The US is taking the topic very seriously as a national security threat and safety of flight risk, but Australia is kind of holding its standing strong with its long-held position that move along, folks. There's nothing to see here. This is a US problem. It's not for Australia to worry about. Everything's, we know it's in our airspace, in our skies, nothing to worry about. And so that's been a driving force for me to kind of sum up the story to where I am today, is to, for the last 3 years, really trying to engage my elected representatives on the topic and engage the Australian government and Department of Defence to find out, why they haven't displayed any serious interest or appetite for the topic when our US ally and Five Eyes partner has been. And so a lot of the documents that I've been able to secure for release through the Freedom of Information Act in Australia and in the United States, exercising my right to information, has been able to reveal some breadcrumbs as to what the thinking and mindset is within the halls of the Australian government and Department of Defence. So that's kind of a long-winded answer for you, but that's where I've come from, and today.
That was a great answer. What are you talking about? That was awesome. That was awesome.
I tend to waffle. So
no, oh my God, I'm a waffler too. Don't. Trust me, my audience is in the chat right now. Oh, Patrick's a waffler too. Right now. Yes. No, that was great. That brought us up to speed, right, on what's happening. Yeah, because perfect segue, because that's why I wanted to have you on. Now, I've seen you on Twitter, especially, different posts, videos, stuff you've had. I've seen clips of your live stream and stuff. I've always thought you've done a great job reporting on this. And I saw that you had revealed some new documents that you had gotten access to, and a lot of people were talking about it. And I thought I was going to do a video, and then I thought, you know what? Great opportunity to meet Grant and talk to him about this, right? Because I wanted to meet you, and I thought this would be perfect, because I like to bring people on when there's a reason to have something to talk about, right? Like something, to something to build off of. So perfect opportunity. And yeah, you found these documents through the Freedom of Information Act. Now, are these documents through America's Freedom of Information Act? And second, I didn't know Australia had a Freedom of Information Act as well.
Yeah. So, one thing that's interesting to know, not a lot of Aussies know this, that non-US citizens aren't prohibited from submitting US FOIA requests.
I was going to ask that.
Yeah. Actually, so whereas that's not necessarily the case in other countries, though. Like, New Zealand has it's the OIA, the Official Information Act, but you have to be a New Zealand citizen in order to submit a request. And I think that's the same for Canada and Australia. So I
thought it was like that for America, if I'm being honest. I was like, wait a second.
And when I first started, learning, I mean, I'm a student of FOIA. I'm learning stuff about it every day, and a lot of the stuff that I've learned through FOIA is to the thanks of my good pal John Greenwell Jr., who you've had on a couple of times. Just reading the documents that he's able to secure for release, reading the requests verbatim that he submits, and so I've standing on the shoulders of giants like folks like John and learning from him directly, and basically the Freedom of Information Act in Australia is actually very comparable to that in the United States, with some subtle differences. One of the advantages is that the statutory response times, the statutory deadline for response in Australia is often the turnaround time is a lot faster in Australia. If you submit a US FOIA request, it can take sometimes years to get.
I think John said he has some that are over a decade.
And I'm like, man,
it's crazy.
Whereas in Australia, you can get a response within 30 days. Usually that's the statutory deadline for response is 30 days. Usually that's stretched out, and it can be anywhere up to typically 90 days is when I kind of get a response. But one of the key points of difference is that in Australia, all of the intelligence services, all of the intelligence agencies, we're talking about the Defence Intelligence Organisation, the Australian Signals Directorate, the National Geospatial Organisation, the Australian Security Intelligence Organisation, ASIS, the Office of National Intelligence, they're all exempt from FOIA. So I can't go after any documents through them, which is not necessarily the case in the United States. So that makes it very frustrating, because I believe, or more than believe, I have a high degree of confidence that the intelligence services in Australia know a hell of a lot more about the UAP topic than the Australian Defence Force services, the Navy, the Army, the Royal Australian Air Force, and the Defence Space Command. And so I can't go after any of their documents, because all of those intelligence agencies are exempt from FOIA. And so that's why I rely on some of the key documents that John's able to secure for release through the NRO.
But you were able to, you're still able to request
submit US FOIA requests. And so this specific document,
just this one, right?
So that's the one. Yeah. So for context for your audience, so on the 31st of May of last year, former director of ARO, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, attended NASA's public hearing on UAP with the independent study team. And he was asked a question by the NASA panel, what collaboration or engagement is there with our international partners and allies? And so Dr. Kirkpatrick announced at that NASA public meeting that he, at the time, had just held his inaugural Five Eyes Forum on UAP. And that raised my eyebrows. I thought, well, there's some engagement between ARO and the Five Eyes. And the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance is a long-standing alliance between the United States, Canada, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand. They share signals intelligence, and that's been a staple for many, many decades. And so following that announcement by Dr. Kirkpatrick, I submitted a ton of FOIA requests in Australia, also in the United States, because at that NASA public hearing, Dr. Kirkpatrick also indicated that Dan Evans, who's one of the NASA UAP independent study team members, attended the Five Eyes Forum on UAP. So I submitted a US FOIA request to NASA requesting emails for Dan Evans pertaining to the Five Eyes Forum. And I got a response back, and it's not in this release, but this release that you've got on screen it stemmed from this initial request that I made to NASA. And I got emails for Dan Evans, which indicated that he had attended, not only obviously attended the Five Eyes Forum on UAP, but that another individual, Mark McInerney, who we know is the NASA's director of UAP research, also attended the Five Eyes Forum on UAP. And there were a lot of redactions in the emails that came back for Dan Evans. And the redactions were referred to the Office of the Secretary of Defense for their review and assessment, to see if their redactions could be cleared. And so they were. These are this email came back, presumably from former ARO director, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, and very significant document because it's the agenda for the Five Eyes Forum on UAP, which we now know was officially referred to by ARO as the Five Eyes, the FVEY, that's the acronym for Five Eyes Inaugural UAP Caucus Working Group meeting. And it took place on the 24th of May, 2023. So it's a very significant document because it gives us some insights as to what ARO was engaging its other Five Eyes partners on the UAP topic. And
because they're updating them, right? They're saying down here at the bottom from 10:15 to 11:30, they're updating Australia, Canada, United Kingdom, New Zealand, right?
And
your
really
argument is that Australia isn't very involved in this, like you said before. So, well, if they're not involved, why are they getting updates on this?
Exactly. And it's really only the United States and Canada that have been open and transparent with their
That's true.
Engagement on the topic. I mean, so in the days following that announcement by Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick at NASA's public meeting on UAP, a reporter for Defense Scoop, Brandy Vincent, reached out to a number of the defense departments across the Five Eyes and solicited comment. And she was able to confirm that Canada was represented at this Five Eyes inaugural UAP caucus working group meeting. It had a member of the Canadian Armed Forces attend the Five Eyes forum. There was representation from the New Zealand Defence Force, but Australia and the UK were being incredibly cagey on their response. They didn't say whether or not they attended. And so that really sparked my interest, and I was able to engage an elected representative in Australia on the topic, Senator Peter Whish-Wilson, the only Australian senator to date that's taken the topic seriously in an Australian context, and asked members of defence leadership about UAP in Australia. And so one of the questions that Senator Whish-Wilson asked, and this is for a bit more context for that document, is Senator Whish-Wilson asked the Australian Department of Defence via the Royal Australian Air Force, did Australia attend the United States briefing on UAPs, being that Five Eyes inaugural UAP caucus working group meeting? And the response that came back in July of last year from the Australian Department of Defence was no, Australia did not attend a United States briefing on UAP. So they initially denied even attending that meeting by ARO. Fast forward to December of last year, when Senator Whish-Wilson, not being satisfied with the response that they provided him in July, asked again, did Australia receive an invitation to attend ARO's Five Eyes Forum on UAP? And if so, why did it choose not to attend? So the Australian Department of Defence at that point in time in December did a 180-degree backflip and admitted that, oh yes, a defence representative based at the Australian Embassy in Washington, DC attended. So they initially denied even attending, and then they're saying that when their hand is pushed, now either they lied or they're incompetent. And recently, another document that I was able to secure for release indicated that, initially when they looked and they asked around if Australia had attended, they weren't able to find any information. But then in December, they were able to get confirmation that there was a defence representative. So that's how frustrating it is trying to get a straight answer from defence in this country. And it doesn't really instill a whole lot of confidence in Australian taxpayers if elected representatives are asking people in positions of authority and leadership in defence, asking questions. How confident can we as taxpayers be that our elected representatives are going to get an accurate and truthful response? Because they denied attending and then they admitted it. So there's either some form of deception or incompetence being played on the Australian Department of Defence side. So that's kind of context for this document, which we can kind of review, go through.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, I mean, one quick point on that. Yeah, absolutely. Because if you only deny it if you have something to deny it from. Otherwise, you would just say, well, we're not sure. We'll get back to you, right? Instead of outright denying. So they must have either talked to somebody, it got back to the PR person, or like you said, incompetence, misinformation within, whatever the telephone chain that it got back the answer. But then how does it change later? Like, what changed from July to December? What information got updated that they would then say, no, actually, Mark up in DC at the embassy, he did show up. One thing I was going to ask you about this, and it's a good point. Let's bring up the document here. So I'm looking at this right at the bottom, and it says Five Eye Partner UAP updates. Now, do you think it's ARRO's updating them with information, or vice versa? Is ARRO bringing them to ask them, what information do you have?
I think it's the latter.
Or both.
I think it's actually both. Yeah. So what Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick said at that NASA public meeting on the 31st of May of last year is that we want to be able to share with our Five Eyes partners what we're doing and to ARRO's credit, they're fulfilling their congressional mandate. Congress legislated that ARRO coordinate with allies and international partners of the United States to better understand the extent and nature of UAP. So they're doing what they're congressionally mandated to do. So I believe that this almost full day meeting was, you can see from 8:45 to 10 a.m., Dr. Kirkpatrick's welcoming address and US updates on UAP efforts. From our operations, our analysis to date, strategic communications, the FAA was in attendance, as was NASA, as was the National Intelligence Manager for Aviation and the National Intelligence Manager for Maritime. So they're providing updates to the Five Eyes partners on what ARO is doing to investigate UAP. And then they're requesting updates from the other Five Eyes members to gain a better understanding as to, well, what are you doing to collect data on UAP, analyze that data? What sensing equipment are you using? So I would be very interested to learn, given that Australia has not investigated the UAP topic since 1996. That's when the Royal Australian Air Force wiped its hand and says, we're no longer investigating UAP, because it did it from the 50s up until mid 1990s.
So they actually had an official statement like, we're done with this.
Yep. The official position
weird,
of the Australian Department of Defence in 1996 was the reason why they stopped investigating UAP was, and this is an almost verbatim quote, is they could not find any compelling or other scientific reason to continue to devote resources to the ongoing investigation of UAP. That was in 1996. Now, several decades later, 2024, we live in a very different time when the landscape on UAP is very, very different. You've got the US saying that UAP represent a national security threat, a safety of flight risk, and it's not an issue that's isolated to the United States. Now, and Australia is saying a very, very different story, that in actual fact, one of the documents that I was able to secure through the Australian Department of Defence Freedom of Information Act was that Australia has no appetite to engage its allies on the topic of UAP. In point of fact, it had actually reached the determination in 2022 when I got a document back saying that UAP are likely to be one of three things: natural or other benign phenomena, anomalies with sensors, or human-made technology, our own tech or foreign adversarial systems. There was complete omission of this catch-all other bin that the ODNI indicated in its preliminary assessment on UAP on the 25th of June, 2021. So it begs the question, Australia has not taken an interest on this topic for several decades. It had not had any briefings from the United States prior to this Five Eyes inaugural UAP caucus working group meeting. And
oh, really? That's interesting.
That's what it's saying. That's what the Australian Department of Defence is saying. So what is it able to bring to the table
in 20
and
years,
contribute to the discussion?
Years, right? Yeah.
Yeah. When they haven't been taking the topic seriously. So I've gone after, I've submitted subsequent FOIA requests in Australia to try and gain an understanding as to, well, what did the defense representative based at the Australian Embassy in Washington, D.C. that attended this Five Eyes Forum, what did they have to present and discuss at this meeting from Australia's perspective? And I'm of the belief that the defense representative that was based at the Australian Embassy in Washington, D.C. that attended ARA's briefing is in the intelligence community. I believe the Defense Intelligence Organization, which is one of the organizations which is exempt from FOIA, because the history of the Defense Intelligence Organization, dating back several decades, it was initially the Joint Intelligence Bureau, and then it transitioned in the Joint Intelligence Organization, where it is today, the Defense Intelligence Organization. And that organization has a history of investigating the UAP topic, as does the Royal Australian Air Force, as does the Department of Supply, which is now defunct. So again, Australia has this long history of investigating the topic. Then it just ceased everything in 1996, and now they're being asked to present at ARA's Five Eyes Forum and report on what its endeavors and efforts are. So what is it able to bring to the table and contribute if it's saying it hasn't investigated the topic for several decades? So that is what I find very interesting.
Okay, so let's like steelman this back so we can kind of, digest all of this and like what exactly you just said, what it means, right? So one real quick part, I keep bringing this up. I want to be able to say what it is. I didn't want to interrupt you. This is the second half to the document, right? So it's giving the other part of the agenda. And I find this 11:30 to 12:30 interesting, right? UAP collaboration way ahead plan. So they must be thinking, how can we work together moving forward?
Yeah.
Right. So obviously there's some sort of agreement to open this up or actually start talking about it again when they said they had wiped their hands with it. They clearly have not wiped their hands with it, right? So is maybe information they're getting from Arrow is making Australia want to look into it more, but Arrow is more leaning towards this is all BS. So how would that make Australia or any of these countries be like, yeah, let's keep looking into this, right? Isn't that weird? It's kind of a weird dichotomy. Why is there a way ahead plan when you're saying that
If
there's
it's
nothing
all
here?
if it's all balloons, drones, and foreign
Yeah,
adversarial
why are
threat.
we trying to like is that the collaboration? Just tell us your balloons and drones, you know, that sort of thing. I don't know. I find that interesting. But
Well, again, remember, I think it's Arrow doing what it's been told to do. Remember, it was
sure.
congressionally mandated to coordinate with allies to better understand the extent and nature of UAP. So, and if you actually go back to that document, if you go back to the very first page, it actually tells you what the intent is behind that meeting, that engagement. So, if you go to the first page, you'll see that when it says who's represented at that meeting, it says what the intent is. It says where is it? There we go. So what the inaugural Five Eyes UAP caucus brings together key partners
Framework
to
for
cultivate
future,
shared awareness of UAP issues, detection, identification, and mitigation activities and challenges, and opportunities for mission-specific collaboration. Planned presentations include our own office updates on operations and analysis, and updates in bold from Five Eyes partners. The intent is to develop a framework for future UAP collaboration. So that way ahead plan, to me, reads as, well, really, we need to collectively as Five Eyes members come up with an action plan for future engagement and future collaboration.
Okay, so just to get back to sort of summarizing all this, because this is a lot to take in, and I guarantee you people are totally confused right now on what is being said. So I'm just trying to bring it down, to help understand this. So basically, the idea is that Australia in 1996, you're claiming they basically wiped their hands of the UAP topic, right?
Yeah.
Now you discover these documents that state that Australia, amongst other nations, but let's just stick with Australia here, has met with Arrow in a private sort of meeting to discuss either past events, get information from Arrow, sort of collaborate, and plan on a future of working together about UAP, topic. And you find that significant because they had claimed before, we're done with this, but clearly they are working on this, right?
Yep.
And so to add on to it, well, no, please go ahead. What did I miss?
I was saying, that even before, Dr. Kirkpatrick announced that he had held the first Five Eyes Forum on UAP, the position of the Australian Department of Defense was, UAP is an issue for the United States. It's not something that the Australian Department of Defense is taking seriously. It's not part of our mission. It's an issue. It's an issue for the United States. And then you have obviously the announcement of this Five Eyes Forum on UAP and documents that have come out since then from the Australian Department of Defense saying, oh, yes, we're now aware of ARO's reports. We're monitoring those reports. We're engaging with ARO. ARO share intelligence with us. So the Australian Department of Defense is now saying that it has open and active engagement with ARO, yet it does not have any. This is the thing that's frustrating. Australia is kind of where the US was about a decade ago, where you've got military aviators and personnel not reporting observations of UAP out of fear of stigma and ridicule. Obviously, Ryan Graves said that they submitted a number of hazard reports because of what they were encountering off I think it was the Atlantic coast in 2014, 2015. But there was no formal UAP reporting protocols. That is where Australia is today. There are no reporting or recording mechanisms in place for defense personnel to report observations of UAP. The Australian Department of Defense is saying that, our existing reporting protocols from a defense aviation safety standpoint are adequate. But they're absolutely not, because you have F-35 pilots sitting down with Ross Coulthart in his living room in his private residence, telling him, Ross, that we're seeing your anomalous objects in Australian airspace that we can't identify, and we're not reporting it to our higher ups because we know they're not taking the topic seriously. I don't want to have a black dot placed against my name if I report UAP. And what's going to happen to my report? There's no investigatory body at the moment on UAP, so they don't report it. And that in itself, in and of itself, I believe is the real national security threat that exists. That if you've got folks that are in a defense in Australian airspace or the Navy, they're observing anomalous objects, UAP, that could be foreign adversarial systems, that could be misidentification, could be our own technology, could be something else. But if they're not reporting it, that is the national security threat. Because what if it is China, Chinese surveillance, Chinese adversarial systems? We're in the same position that United States was about a decade ago. And all we as Australians want is the Australian government and Department of Defense to acknowledge that UAP is a real phenomenon, to investigate it and to reach some conclusion as to what UAP are, whether it is prosaic, explainable technology, or if it's something more exotic. Either way, we want to know, and I think that's worth advocating for.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, well said, man. So great segue. You brought up Ross Coulthart. Ross Coulthart saw the tweet that you had put out, right? And he added on to it. So I'm just going to read this real quick, and then I'll have you comment on it.
Yeah.
There's nothing in this UAP nonsense, of course. So why is the security classification for U.S. shared UAP intelligence with Australia up to TS/TK, top secret talent keyhole, satellite and sensor system imagery? This revealing FOIA from Grant Lavac shows UAPs are protected among the Five Eyes by the highest TS/SCI classification, but of course, nothing in it.
Yeah.
So what is he saying here? What is he getting at?
He's basically saying if ARO has reached the conclusion, or the conclusions that ARO has put out publicly to date, is that it's balloons, it's drones, it's foreign adversarial systems. If it's all prosaic and that basic, why is then the highest level of security classification being placed on UAP? And to kind of walk you through what those acronyms are. So TS, SI, TK, REL, that's about as high as it gets for intelligence sharing amongst the Five Eyes. And so those acronyms, for your audience that may not have a frame of reference, TS stands for top secret. That's a classification level. SI is special intelligence. TK is talent keyhole. And REL means relevant to the Five Eyes. So if you're wondering what that all means, I'll just kind of describe it briefly. So TS, top secret, information that would cause grave damage to the United States government if it were to be disclosed without authorization. SI, special intelligence or sensitive compartmented information control system. That's a system to protect national intelligence information concerning sources and methods. SEI is divided into control systems and compartments, which are further divided into sub-control systems and sub-compartments. These systems and compartments are usually identified by a classified code word, some of which were leaked or have been declassified. In total, there may be between 100 to 300 SEI compartments and sub-compartments grouped into about 24 control systems. TK, talent keyhole. This is the one that I didn't know what the acronym was for, and I reached out to a few folks that were able to give me some context. TK, talent keyhole. This control system is for products of overhead collection systems, such as satellites and reconnaissance aircraft, and contains compartments which are identified by a classified code word. The original talent compartment was created in the mid-1950s for the U-2. In 1960, it was broadened to cover all national aerial reconnaissance, and the keyhole compartment was created for satellite intelligence. The term talent keyhole was declassified in 1998. So it's looking at satellite intelligence that's relevant to the Five Eyes. So you've got this highest level of intelligence that's being shared across the Five Eyes on the UAP topic. And if it's all just balloons, drone, and prosaic foreign adversarial systems, that raises the question, well, why is that level of classification being applied to UAP across the Five Eyes? Now, it could have to do with all of the classified sensors and sensing.
That's what I was going to say. Wouldn't they use that same if it was our stuff or their or Australia's right system? So that doesn't seem that crazy.
And that's an argument, and I agree that's an argument that can be made. But it's certainly what is fascinating is that you've got Australia and the UK and New Zealand that have pretty much said none and Buckley's about the UAP topic to its citizens. We have the United States and Canada openly talking about it. Canada to a lesser extent, but they have the Sky Project Canada program that is due to release its report, I believe, in the coming months. And you've got the US leading the charge and being open with its citizens on its efforts to understand and get to the bottom of UAP, UFO. But Australia, New Zealand, UK, they're not talking about it, yet they've been invited to participate in a UAP caucus
and participating, because they could have denied it, right? They could have said, "No, we're not going to come. We in 1996 we washed our hands with it, Arrow, so we're not going to come." But they said,
and that's exactly what they did. They denied attending, and then they backflipped and said, "Oh yes,
that's
we did
also
attend."
weird, right? That is also. I agree. That's the biggest part of this story to me. Like that's what stuck out to me. That's what made me say, "Okay, I got to get Grant on and talk about this." Wait a second. I thought we weren't talking about this. Well, we are talking about this, right? And you expressing, disappointment, right? And I think a lot of your fellow Aussies agree, right? Like, why are we not looking into this? Is clearly something's going on because we're leaving data on the ground, on the cutting room floor, right? You're saying there's pilots that are afraid to come forward and tell their stories. So that's data. That's a report. We're leaving that out in the ether. So when Arrow releases their historical report or any report, clearly it's insufficient because there is data not being reported. Now, should Arrow's historical report include information from outside the world, or outside of America, excuse me? I don't know. Potentially. How can we understand the UAP topic when it's not an American topic? It's not an Australian topic, right? It's a global topic. So the idea that we wouldn't include information from our Five Eyes, we're having meetings with them, we're sharing information. Why doesn't this go in the report? So for me, I can infer even more from these documents, meaning that it's insufficient what we're getting from Arrow. It's literally leaving data on the floor that we're not getting.
Absolutely. And point of fact, it actually did report in the historical report, volume 1 on page 26, I believe it is. It did put almost, it was kind of like a half a page summary about what allies of the United States have been doing on UAP. It talked primarily about Canada. It talked about the UK, which, the UK put out the Condine report years ago saying basically there's nothing to UAP. So
but UK, half a page for 3 countries worth of history. So, come on, it's a joke.
There was no, the history that Australia has investigating the topic that was completely left off the page. Like Australia has from the 50s to the mid 90s investigating the UFO phenomenon, and it abandoned its ongoing investigation despite the fact that it could not explain approximately 3% of its caseload, of its case files. And wouldn't that be enough of a compelling reason to want to continue to investigate the topic? If you can't explain away 100%, or obviously lack of data is always going to be an issue, but if there's still unresolved issues, unresolved cases, they're the ones that you want to get to the bottom of. And I just find it mind-boggling in this day and age that Australia is so lockstep with the United States on almost every other defense initiative. I mean, we're spending about $500 billion to acquire 3 Virginia-class nuclear attack submarines. And we know that the UAP topic has a connection to, nuclear, the nuclear element to it, nuclear power, nuclear energy. We're investing all of this money to buy all this technology, but we're completely at the other end of the spectrum from the United States on the UAP topic. And I don't know why Australia is so late to the party to engage on the topic. They are now. We know that the intelligence organizations within Australia are likely the ones that are engaging with ARO. But again, what is Australia able to bring to the conversation if what the Australian Department of Defence is saying publicly is move along, folks? There's nothing
That's
to
a
see.
government thing, though, right? That's what all governments do. They lie. They say, move along. There's nothing here. But they're looking into,
And look,
they
I'll
got
tell you why I
information.
think they're saying that.
And that's the government, too. Let's be real. The citizens of Australia have probably, if you were to ask the majority of, why aren't we reporting this stuff? Why aren't we looking into this? I don't know. What do you think? Do you think the majority of, because that's how it is in America. Even if you don't believe it's aliens or whatever, most people are like, we should look into this. Right? Like,
it doesn't
regardless.
Exactly. And I've always come at this topic from the national security threat, safety, and flight risk.
Totally.
I submitted a petition to the Australian House of Representatives in the middle of last year, and we're able to secure 758 signatures from my fellow Aussies that requested that the Australian government complete a formal review of its position on UAP, because it's holding its position of 1996 that there's no compelling reason or scientific reason to investigate the topic. So asking the Australian government to formally review its position and consider implementing some form of investigatory body to assess the national security threats and safety flight risk that UAP pose. And the response that came back from the Australian Minister of Defence was, again, the issue of UAP is a matter for the United States. It's not a priority and one of defence's objectives in Australia. And they're saying basically that our current safety reporting protocols are sufficient to
adequate.
collect UAP, which is in conflict with what I was saying before. Military aviators sitting down with Ross Coulthard and saying we're not reporting it because we're not confident that our higher ups in defense leadership are going to take us seriously or do anything with it. And this is the real kicker for me. And I know I've been kind of yapping on for a while here, but February of last year, the Chinese spy balloon and those 3 unidentified aerial objects, which are still unidentified aerial objects, we don't know what they were. After that happened, that was in February of 2023. This was before ARO's Five Eyes Forum on UAP. Senator Wish Wilson, in a Senate estimates hearing, it's kind of like a budget oversight hearing, he pressed the current Chief of Air Force, Air Marshal Robert Chipman, about Australia's engagement with the United States on the Chinese balloon shoot down on those 3 unidentified aerial objects. And the Chief of Air Force basically said, we requested information and a briefing from the US Department of Defense via the air attaché in Washington, D.C., on the shoot down of the Chinese spy balloon and those 3 objects, because we wanted to understand what the source of those objects were, their identity, and more importantly, see what learnings could be gained from the US response to the shoot down of those objects. Because the US Department of Defense told everyone that they were shot down. Even Biden said this. They were shot down because the Chinese spy balloon represented a national security threat to the United States from a surveillance perspective. And those unidentified aerial objects represented a safety of flight risk to civil aviation. That's why they were brought down. Now, UAP represent exactly the same thing: a national security threat and a safety of flight risk. So the Australian Department of Defence is quite happy to request a formal briefing from the United States Department of Defence on the Chinese spy balloon and those 3 unidentified aerial objects. But up until that point, it had not engaged the US Department of Defense on UAP and requested a formal briefing. It wasn't until ARO said we're congressionally mandated to engage our allies on the topic. We're inviting you, Australia, our Five Eyes partner, to an all-day briefing, and we want to know what you know about UAP so we can try and get to the bottom of it. So there's that hypocrisy being played within the Australian Department of Defense. And to your point, government will only, and I reached out to Susan Gough only a few days ago to try and get some more information about how frequently this Five Eyes UAP caucus working group will engage. And true Susan Gough fashion, it was kind of a non-answer, which I can read for you. But that's unfortunately what's so frustrating with the government and the Australian and the US Department of Defense, is they'll never volunteer any information. They'll give you the absolute minimum, and in most cases give you a non-answer to the questions that you ask. And this is why I encourage so many of my fellow Aussie citizens that take this topic seriously, is to engage their elected representatives on this topic. So there's only so much that I can do to ask my government or request information through FOIA. But if I engage my elected representative, like I have Senator Peter Whish-Wilson, and thankfully developed enough of a relationship with him to provide him with information that I'm able to find and actually propose questions for him to ask in Senate estimates, which he's done. If you develop a relationship with your elected representative, you can help inform their line of thinking and lines of inquiry on this topic, and hopefully try and get a little bit more transparency and accountability from those that we elect into positions of leadership and obviously in authority in the Australian Department of Defence. But so that's a big source of frustration. But this is the email that I sent, just for your frame of reference. I sent this email to Susan Goff the other day. Following the release of this document, which we can go through the rest of it, I said, at your convenience, could you kindly comment by way of response to the following questions? How many times has the Five Eyes UAP Caucus Working Group convened since the inaugural meeting held on the 24th of May, 2023? How frequently does the Five Eyes UAP Caucus Working Group convene? How does the Five Eyes UAP Caucus Working Group convene? Is it in person or virtually? And when is the next UAP Caucus Working Group meeting scheduled for? The response that I received just this morning is, Grant, ARO held its first Five Eyes Working Group in May 2023 and continues to discuss areas of mutual interest and concern related to UAP with its Five Eyes partners. ARO is committed to working with allies and partners in an open, sharing environment to identify and resolve UAP sightings. So that's great to hear that, but it doesn't really address the questions that I was
not at all
asking whatsoever.
Not at all. I mean, well, Sean Kirkpatrick's out, so will the new guy want to continue to do this? Maybe everyone told him, we just don't know what they talked about, right? So it's hard to determine what is the action plan moving forward, if any. Maybe they're just like, we got nothing to report, so we're out. Like there's nothing for us to do. Yeah, we're happy to show up, send a representative, but we're not going to do anything. And he's there just for the luncheon, the free lunch. So he doesn't care.
Food court.
Yeah, and the Pentagon food. Yeah. How hilarious was that? I said no host. Like that was funny.
Exactly.
In that thing, that was funny. But look, Grant. Look, I gotta before we go, because I have another interview right after this, actually. So I didn't know this would take. Like I should have blocked more time for us to talk about this today. I didn't realize it would go this deep. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. I should have. I'm an idiot. I should have known it goes deeper. So we're definitely have to do a round 2 on this. And before we go, definitely I want people to know where to find you, get more information on all this stuff, because I've seen you've done other live streams. You've talked about this stuff. You go in deeper. So we'll make sure people have all those links and everything. But before we go, I do want to. A lot of people that are familiar with you asked me, when you were coming on, hey, ask them about MH370. So I just figured we'd talk about that real quick. Curious. Yeah, I mean, that's what they asked me to ask you. So I don't know. Do you have some sort of strong feelings about it or something that you've made public, or I don't know anything?
Yeah. So when it was first reported, so when, Ashton Forbes, and to his credit, he's done a hell of a lot of work trying to investigate what he believes to be a real event. I was quite agnostic on the, I didn't invest any time, a significant amount of time or energy into it, not nearly as obviously as much as Ashton has done, to his credit. And I engaged him on social media. He actually reached out to me privately in a direct message because I commented on a post, and he said, look, if you have any questions, please ask me. And so I asked him a couple of questions that I thought were interesting and maybe challenged the narrative that he was putting out at the time. And the lack of engagement, or the almost disrespectful response that I received from him to engaging him on his narrative, got me thinking, that's a bit odd. I mean, if you want to get to the bottom of to the truth, to the heart of what an issue is, wouldn't you want to engage with as many people across the aisle as you can, whether they're skeptics, debunkers, those that are VFX experts, and get their opinions so we can all reach the same conclusion? And I've just been kind of taken aback a bit by the lack of engagement and the way that Ashton has carried himself in responding to those that have tried to challenge his narrative or the story that he has put out. And to the credit of many of those that have come forward with counter arguments to what Ashton's put forward. I know, Krish Lee and there are other individuals that have, put forward their debunking, so to speak, that it is a hoax. It is a hoax, and reasons why it's a hoax and why it's VFX and so on. So I'm kind of no longer investing any thought or in energy on the MH370 topic. I do believe that it's dead and buried. I think it was a hoax, and unfortunately, a hoax that takes advantage of the families of the victims that lost their lives from that tragedy. And I think it's unfortunate that the individual that is pushing the MH370 narrative is married to the narrative that he created and doesn't want to accept any counter arguments. That's my personal opinion. Everyone has their own, but I don't think the MH370 story is anything more than an elaborate hoax.
Right on. Yeah, man. Hey, well, all allowed to have opinions on this and our own journeys, and I've had Ashton on the show and let him talk about his stuff. I even had him on a live stream, and happy to have you on and give your opinion as well. Right? Like, I'm personally out of it. I just stay out of it all as far as that goes. So I appreciate you answering that. Like, I appreciate you giving your take on that. I think people who follow you wanted to hear that. So, and cool. Thank you for saying that.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Okay, well, Grant, where do you want people to follow you? Like, I follow you on Twitter, but where, let people know.
Yeah, I mean, most of my engagement on social media is predominantly on Twitter. I don't engage on Facebook or Instagram or anything like that. So if people want to find me and follow me on Twitter, my handle's just @GrantLavac. I have a YouTube channel, which I've kind of labeled the Unexplained Rundown, where I really just cover Australia's engagement and really lack thereof on the UAP topic. So anyone that's interested to learn what I find on Australia's lack of interest can just search for me on YouTube, again, Grant Lavac, or type in the Unexplained Rundown.
No, we'll have it in the description too, guys. Go to the description, click it there. But I mean, and that's the description.
And that's my primary focus. That's what a lot of folks will see predominantly on my channel, but there are other things that I've researched as well. Like, I had an opportunity to meet with a number of primary witnesses from the Westall flying saucer incident, which I know you covered on your channel. Shane Ryan did that wonderful documentary, Westall 66, a suburban UFO mystery. So I have a documentary on my channel pertaining to the Westall incident, Kurt Russell's encounter with the Phoenix Lights. So a few other things that I find interesting that I wanted to dive into.
Love that. Yeah, the Westall, man. Oh my God, we could do.
We should
do a whole episode on that. We should. Well, yeah, I should have you back on to just talk about that period, because that is super intriguing. I would say it's in my top 5 of just all the stories I've ever heard. It's in my top 5.
It's certainly the most renowned unresolved cold case for Australia. So every country has its Roswell, and I guess that's Australia's Roswell, for a lack of a better term.
No, that's a great way to put it. No, and that's awesome, man. Look, you've been amazing today. Thank you for coming on and explaining a lot of this.
Appreciate it.
I think what most people are going to get out of this is, hey, wait a second. There's more. First of all, it implies that there's more behind the scenes with Arrow than is being right. And there's an extra thumbs up to let you know that I'm real serious about this, Grant. Okay. And they're clearly, their reports are inadequate, right? That's what I infer, because other countries are leaving out. They're not reporting this stuff, but then Arrow's asking them, hey, what do you have from your country? How can Australia give any answer when they have no reporting process? Well, it is, even if they give an answer, it's inadequate. Then Arrow runs with that inadequate information in their reports, right? half a page in their historical reports. Get out of here.
Mm.
And
But I mean,
you know,
and how
Australia,
embarrassing is that for Australia, though? If we're attending ARA's meeting and says, "Oh, sorry, folks, we haven't investigated since 1966,"
absolutely
I
embarrassing.
got nothing to say. I mean, you know,
Or
talk
if
about
they
it.
say something, or if they give a definitive answer, knowing that that's impossible. You don't know. It's like saying the well's empty, but you didn't check the well.
Yeah,
You don't know if it's empty or not because you didn't look. You're just
yeah,
saying
exactly right.
it is because in
Exactly.
'96 we decided whatever. So it's the only answer Australia can give that would be truthful is we don't know because we haven't looked into it, or they have looked into it, but it's private and it's secret and it's top secret and you guys don't know about it and they're keeping it, which is possible too, right? I guess at the end of the day,
I suspect there's truth to
a
that
little bit of
latter.
both, right?
Yep.
Like a little bit
Yeah,
of everything,
right.
which is interesting. So look, I definitely look forward to seeing your updates, what you present from the Australian side, what's happening there. I think that's important because a lot of people focus on America and what's happening in America, but I think it is important to focus on different parts of what's happening in the world because at the end of the day, it all connects.
Yeah,
We all
totally.
connect one
That's
way or
right.
the other. So again,
And,
man,
I mean, look
yeah,
what Japan's doing now. Like
yeah,
Japan
great point.
has a bipartisan group that is now pushing for creation of an investigatory body on UAP. So Japan, another ally of Australia, that's taking the topic seriously. So, you know, Australia and the UK and New Zealand are fortunately going to be left well behind the eight ball when so
Not
many
good.
other allies are leading the charge.
Yeah, not good. No, I'm with you, man.
Yeah.
Well, look, people like yourself, Ross, right? More people pushing that side. Maybe something will change. I mean, who knows, right?
Here's the
If you
hoping.
look, if you say in Australia is 10 years behind America, well, look where we're at now. So
Yep.
there's hope.
Yep.
There's hope for Australia if they see this is what in my opinion, Australia is going to do it if they see an advantage to it, right? If they see it's working for America, they're going to implement it.
Hmm.
In my opinion, if they see, oh, you know what, there is an advantage to having a separate reporting system, a separate office. Could be budgetary reasons. I mean, I don't know Australia's financial system and how that works and what sort of debt and, you know, that sort of thing, how much money gets spent on defense and, you know, so I don't know.
They've said in documents that when the volume of reports and credibility of reports reaches a threshold, then we will consider implementing an investigatory body. But again, if there's no current reporting protocols,
how are you going to know?
Reporting protocols equals no reports.
Yeah, you don't know. You're right. You're right. That makes no sense because how are you going to know what the threshold is? We're not keeping track of the threshold.
Yeah, and the stigma and ridicule that plagues the topic. I mean, we could have a whole conversation around the stigma and ridicule that exists on topic in Australia, which I've been able to show through FOIA as well. But the challenge, the pursuit continues. So
you got an uphill battle, Grant, but you're doing a great job, man. I implore everyone to check out your channel, check you out on Twitter. And yeah, just so happy you came on, man. I really appreciate that. And thank you for just sharing
the conversation.
Yeah, man. Thank you for sharing everything you did and just for that hard work and finding these documents. And, you know, it's people like you that are really doing this, you know, boots on the ground work and finding this stuff out. And we need that. So thank you.
Yep. We just want more information, more data, more clarity, and that's what I'm trying to get for. And
we want to see aliens.
Interest in Australia. Yeah, well, I mean that would be the cherry on the cake, wouldn't it?
I mean, and we want to see aliens. Come on, and a UFO.
You know, that would be. I mean, it answers the one big question, and one of the three big questions we have is: are we alone? And if we can answer that, that's a pretty cool thing to happen. I mean, what an exciting time to be alive. To be honest, with everything that's been going on this topic, you have some very intelligent and credible people working within the intelligence community in the United States that are saying some very incredible things. So either it's all true, or there are a lot of credulous true believers within the U.S. Department of Defense intelligence community that believe something that's not true, or it is disinformation that's been put out there to misdirect our foreign adversaries, or it's a combination of all three of those things. So, you know, who knows?
Yeah, that's right. I couldn't agree more, man. Well, thank you again, Grant. I really do appreciate it, man.
Thanks for having me on, Patrick. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.